Diana Ross is now over 80 years old, and her current state is sad. Her name has resonated for decades in music, fashion, and film. A voice that emerged from the housing projects of Detroit ended up intertwined with the soundtrack of modern culture. Diana Ross is not just a singer, nor just an actress. She is an icon who transformed what it means to be seen, heard, and remembered. When discussing legendary voices, the names of Aretha Franklin, Whitney Houston, and Beyoncé usually come to mind first. Each defined an era, Aretha with the power of soul, Whitney with an unparalleled vocal range, and Beyoncé with her mastery of contemporary performance. But Diana Ross occupies a different place. She is the thread that connects them, the bridge that carried the dream of black female artistry from the struggles of the 1960s to the global stages of the 21st century. Without her, the path for those who came after would have been much steeper. Her music didn't just conquer the charts, it touched lives. One fan wrote that as a young black woman in the segregated South, she overcame heartbreak and loneliness by listening to "Ain't No Mountain High Enough" over and over. In that song, she found permission to dream big, to believe that barriers, social, racial, or personal, could crumble. In that moment, Ross wasn't just a singer. She was companionship. She was courage. Multiply that story by millions, and you begin to understand her true impact. She not only shaped the culture, but also the inner lives of those who needed her most. She dazzled in sequins and gowns, but behind the glamour was a woman who dared to cross boundaries marked by race, gender, and expectations. Admired and criticized in equal measure, she transformed ambition into survival, and survival into legend. Today, well into her 80s, she still walks red carpets and takes to the stage. She turned ambition into survival, and survival into legend. Today, in her 80s, she still walks red carpets and takes to the stage. But her story is no longer just about fame. It also speaks of intimate moments, family, and the price of upholding a symbol for so long. So, who is Diana Ross when the lights go down? What truths lie hidden behind the wigs and spotlights? And what do her decisions, triumphs, and scars reveal about the cost of being an icon? Welcome to her story. Section 1. In Detroit in the mid-1940s, full of energy, curiosity, and the certainty that something great awaited her. That little girl was Diana Ross, or rather, Diane Earl, as her mother named her at birth on March 26, 1944. An administrative error on the birth certificate transformed Diane into Diana, and the name stuck, although at home and at school she remained Diane for years. She grew up in the Brewster Douglas Projects, a working-class neighborhood where hope triumphed over hardship. Diane was the second of 6 children. Her mother, Ernestine, filled the home with enthusiasm, while her father, Fred, a disciplined factory worker, taught her the value of hard work. Money was tight, but determination was plentiful. At Cass Technical High School, she studied fashion design, tailoring, and cosmetology. She worked part-time at Hudson's department store. She was one of the first black women hired as a lunchroom attendant and styled neighbors' hair to earn extra money. She wasn't preparing for fame. She was building skills, independence, and a clear sense of identity. Music found her in 1959 when she joined Mary Wilson, Florence Ballard, and Betty McGlown to form the Primates. They sang at school dances and talent shows, covering Ray Charles and the Drifters. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a stepping stone to something bigger. Smokey Robinson heard them and introduced them to Berry Gordy of Motown. At first, they were rejected for being too young, but they persisted, waiting outside Hitsville, USA, until they caught people's attention. In January 1962, after graduating early from high school, Motown signed the group. They became the Supremes, and Ross soon took center stage with her clear, distinctive voice. Their first recordings achieved moderate success, but they were the beginning of something bigger. Even then, observers noticed Ross's quiet determination to stand out. She moved with a special poise, with a spark that suggested she was looking beyond the neighborhood stages. It wasn't yet full-blown ambition, but it was the first sign of a young woman convinced she was destined for something more. In retrospect, those early years were a foundation built on tenacity and persistence. Fashion classes, hairstyling jobs, street auditions. These weren't detours. They were stepping stones. When the Supremes began to climb the charts, Diana Ross wasn't just singing, she was already shaping her destiny. Beyond the constant presence of her parents, Diana's family life played a quiet but profound role in her development. She was especially close to her younger brother, Arthur T. Boy Ross, who would later become a Motown songwriter, penning songs recorded by Michael Jackson and Marvin Gaye. The siblings often shared late-night conversations about dreams bigger than Detroit. Arthur would write lyrics while Diana hummed melodies. That creative bond in their own home solidified the idea that art could be a family legacy, not just a personal ambition. Neighbors in Brewster Douglas still remember young Diane placing a chair on the sidewalk. Sometimes she'd be practicing sewing, and the next minute she'd be styling a neighbor's hair. She'd charge a few coins, and sometimes just a smile. That skill helped her earn a little pocket money, but more importantly, it helped her build relationships with the community. To them, she wasn't yet a star, but a girl with quick hands and big eyes, who seemed destined for more than just the neighborhood. At Cass Technical High School, one of her teachers noticed something special. Every one of Diane's performances had an uncommon sparkle. Once, after a school recital, the teacher leaned in and said, "You were born to be seen. Don't hide behind the sewing machine." That advice stuck with her, quietly nurturing the idea that her place wasn't just in the fashion world, but also on the stage. Section 2. Success with the Supremes. When the Supremes broke through, it wasn't a gradual process. It was a meteoric rise. In 1963, when the love light starts shining through his eyes gave them their first taste of the music charts. A year later, Where Did Our Love Go shot to #1. And suddenly, 3 young men from a working-class neighborhood in Detroit became international stars. What followed was a golden streak. Baby Love, Stop, In the Name of Love, I Hear a Symphony, You Can't Hurry Love. Between 1964 and 1967, they racked up 10 #1 singles, a record for any girl group of their time. But their story was never just about music. In the midst of the racially divided America of the 1960s, the Supremes became cultural icons. They wore dazzling dresses on The Ed Sullivan Show, graced magazine covers, and filled living rooms where black artists had never been welcomed before. They weren't just breaking sales records, they were breaking barriers. Even at the top, the group began to change. From the start, Berry Gordy saw in Diana Ross the face capable of taking Motown further. She was placed at the center of attention. She sang lead vocals, gave interviews, and commanded the cameras. But that spotlight came at a price. Florence Ballard, the group's powerful contralto, began to feel sidelined. Mary Wilson recalled how the easy laughter of the early years gradually gave way to tension. Not even Diana was immune to the pressure. Her ambition drove her, but it also isolated her. In 1967, during a show in Boston, she collapsed on stage. A symbol of her strength, but also of the weight of carrying the group's success. That same year, the change was made official. The group became known as Diana Ross and the Supremes. Shortly after, Florence left and was replaced by Cindy Birdson. For some, it was a strategy. For others, a betrayal. But the truth is that the Supremes ceased to be a trio of equals and became the platform for a rising star. The path within the Supremes was never easy. Florence, who had helped form the group, suffered as Diana's growing prominence surprised fans, sparking rumors of favoritism and betrayal that still haunt the group's history. Mary Wilson, meanwhile, maintained a complex relationship with Ross. In her memoirs, she admitted to admiring her determination, but also resenting how the spotlight damaged their friendship. They were sisters in music, but rivals in fate. A smile on stage, distance behind the curtain. The press fanned that flame. In the mid-60s, tabloids often portrayed Diana as Berry Gordy's protégé, implying that her rise wasn't due to her own merit, but rather to her close relationship with the Motown founder. For a young African-American woman under immense pressure, those headlines stung. She later confessed in interviews that she felt constantly judged, celebrated as a star, but treated as guilty for her ambition. Even so, the achievements were monumental. In just a few years, they racked up 12 #1 hits, rivaling even the Beatles in cultural impact. They paved the way for other artists, proving that their success left Mary Wilson disillusioned, and in her memoirs, Diana acknowledged the loneliness she hid beneath the sequins and spotlights. Fame made her iconic, but it also isolated her, applauded on stage, alone when the curtain fell. In 1970, the end was inevitable. Someday We'll Be Together was their last #1 hit as a group. For Diana Ross, it was a goodbye, and at the same time, a beginning. The moment that spark that had been born in a teenager from Detroit finally led her to claim her own destiny. Section 3. Diana Ross's rise as a solo artist. When she left the stage with the Supremes, Diana Ross didn't enter solo life cautiously. She went all in. In May 1970, she released her first solo album, simply titled Diana Ross. It included an anthem-like song, Ain't No Mountain High Enough. She was no longer just the voice of a group, she was an independent artist. That single reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart, marking the beginning of her own rise. That record wasn't a one-off. She quickly released Everything Is Everything to the Jackson 5. Then came the movies. In 1972, she starred in Lady Sings the Blues, portraying the legendary Billie Holiday. Critics were divided. Some doubted she could pull it off. When the film hit theaters, the doubts were dispelled. Leonard Feather, jazz critic and friend of Billie Holiday, declared that she had captured her essence. That role earned her an Oscar nomination. In the following years, she continued to advance. In Mahogany, 1975, she played a design student who becomes a model, and, incredibly, she designed her own wardrobe. The title song, Do You Know Where You're Going To, became a massive hit, and to this day is one of those melodies that immediately brings Diana Ross to mind. In 1978, Motown took a big gamble with The Wiz, a remake of The Wizard of Oz set in an African-American community. Diana played Dorothy, alongside none other than Michael Jackson. The critics weren't kind, and the film lost money, but the soundtrack did leave its mark, especially the duet Down the Road. During the early and mid-1970s, Diana wasn't just acting, she was evolving as an artist. In 1973, Touch Me in the Morning reached #1, cementing her status as a solo artist. More hits followed, including Them from Mahogany, Do You Know Where You're Going To, and Love Hangover, showcasing her natural ability to move between ballads and disco. And so we enter the 1980s. First came The Boss in 1979. Disco was still alive and well, and she embraced it wholeheartedly. The title track was a dance floor smash. Then came Diana, written in lowercase, released in May 1980. It was her best-selling studio album to date. Working with Nile Rodgers and Bernard Edwards of Chic, she found a fresh sound. It spawned two anthems, Upside Down, which spent 4 weeks at #1, and I'm Coming Out, which peaked at #5. Upside Down crossed borders, reaching #1 in Australia, Sweden, South Africa, and beyond. Over time, critics hailed it as her best solo work, an album that captured freedom and identity. It even appears on Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest albums. Then there's I'm Coming Out. At first glance, it was just a dance track, but it soon transformed into an anthem of self-expression, embraced wholeheartedly by the LGBTQ community. And Diana didn't stop there. In 1981, she returned to film with the title track from It's My Turn. That same year, she joined forces with Lionel Richie on Endless Love. The duet, created for the film of the same name, became a phenomenon. 9 weeks at #1, the best-selling single of 1981 and the most successful duet in popular music history. That moment marked a turning point. With 6 #1 solo singles, she equaled and eventually surpassed the most by any female singer in history. At the end of 1981, she left Motown and signed with RCA to a multi-million-dollar contract. Her first album with them, Why Do Fools Fall in Love, brought hits like the title track Mirror, Mirror, Missing You, and Muscles. The latter was produced by Michael Jackson. This kept her on the charts throughout the early 1980s. The decade was a mix. She continued with the album, explored pop, experimented with new producers, and toured constantly. In the United States, some albums had less impact, but in Europe, she remained strong. At the same time, her film career began to fade. None of her roles after The Wiz achieved the same brilliance, although the influence of those films is still evident in her performances. If you think about it, one thing is clear. Diana Ross never rested on her early fame. With each stage, she sought to reinvent herself, even at the risk of criticism. Collaborating with Chic during a time of musical change, switching labels, taking risks in film, all of this could have led to her downfall, but she always persevered. Of course, it wasn't all perfect. The move to RCA didn't bring him any more #1 hits in the United States, and his chart dominance gradually faded. His subsequent albums, while solid, didn't achieve the same impact as his earlier work. And his films after The Wiz didn't generate the same buzz, but they still managed to... It could be said that she changed her position in the rankings through constant relevance, without settling for nostalgia. That takes courage. During this period, Diana's life followed 2 parallel paths. Music, which ranged from disco and pop to ballads, and film, less glamorous but always present. She created solos that resonated with diverse audiences. She found key collaborators and never fell off the cultural radar. She broke the mold of the group. She pioneered new sounds. She followed her instincts, sometimes uncertain, often risky, and left a legacy that others would follow. Women who cross genres, who act and sing, who build identity through music. But behind the glamour of success, her personal life was also intense. Her relationship with Berry Gordy, the founder of Motown, wasn't just professional. They shared a romance that for years was one of the most talked about in the industry. From that union came her first daughter, Rhonda, although the truth about his paternity remained private for a long time. For Diana, it was a delicate balance, being the face of Motown while also navigating love under the intense scrutiny of fame. In 1971, Diana married music executive Robert Ellis Silverstein. The wedding was a fairy tale affair, with celebrity guests and headlines celebrating the diva who had finally found stability. They had 2 daughters, Thrassie and Chutney, while Silverstein acknowledged and raised Rhonda as his own. For a time, Ross had it all: chart-topping records, Hollywood roles, and a growing family. But the pressures of fame and her relentless schedule took their toll. In 1977, they divorced, leaving Diana to grapple with balancing motherhood and stardom. Amid these personal ups and downs, Ross cultivated deep friendships. Her Motown colleague Marvin Gaye was a frequent confidant, and their playful studio rivalry is fondly remembered. But it was her close relationship with Michael Jackson that garnered the most attention. She met him when he was just a boy, when the Jackson 5 arrived at Motown and became his mentor, almost a second mother. Her public displays of affection fueled all sorts of rumors. Jackson even said, "She is everything to me. If I had to trust my life to anyone, it would be Diana." Still, the glare of the spotlight was relentless. Ross's private joys and sorrows often became tabloid fodder. The press simultaneously portrayed her as a control-obsessed diva and a vulnerable woman determined to shield her children from the chaos of fame. But even in those turbulent years, she never allowed scandal to overshadow her art. She poured every hurt and every triumph into her music, transforming her life into song. Behind the glitz and demanding tours, Diana Ross's truest role unfolded quietly: motherhood. Unlike many stars of her time who kept their children out of the public eye, Ross often traveled with hers. She turned tour buses and hotel suites into makeshift nurseries. She believed that if the stage demanded her presence, her children deserved it too. After nights of dazzling performances, she would return to her room, set aside the sequins, and lull her daughters to sleep with the same lullabies that sold millions of records during the day. Each of her children grew up as a reflection of her, yet with their own unique light. Rhonda, the eldest, became deeply rooted in music, composing and singing with a sincerity reminiscent of the Motown legacy. Tracy, with her indomitable spirit, threw herself into performing with defiant energy. She later confessed that watching her mother command audiences gave her the courage to forge her own path, to be more than just Diana Ross's child, and to assert herself as an artist in her own right. For Ross, raising them wasn't about shielding them from fame, but about teaching them to be strong within it. "I wanted them to know a love louder than the noise of the world," she once confessed. And perhaps that was her greatest performance. Not as a diva in the spotlight, but as a mother whispering strength into her children's hearts. That is the story of Diana Ross in the 70s and 80s. Solo singer, actress, a career that went beyond fame, earning her a place not only as a chart-topping star, but as an artist who always dared to push boundaries. Section 4. Glory, awards, and a lasting legacy. By the time Diana Ross entered the later stages of her career, her place in music history was already secured. She had defined 3 distinct decades, breaking records with the Supremes in the 60s, topping the charts as a solo artist in the 70s, and setting cultural trends in the 80s. What followed was not another climb to stardom, but recognition of what she had already built. In 1988, the Supremes were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, a reminder that the Detroit trio had changed American music forever. 2 decades later, in 2007, the Kennedy Center Honors placed Ross among America's cultural giants, with Smokey Robinson and others paying tribute to her as the voice that brought the Motown sound into homes around the world. In 2012, she received the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award, a long-awaited honor for an artist whose influence extended far beyond trophies. 4 years later, President Barack Obama presented her with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, calling her one of the voices that helped shape the American spirit. And in 2017, the American Music Awards celebrated her career with a Lifetime Achievement Award, where Ross closed the show surrounded by her children and grandchildren. A moment that spoke less of awards and more of legacy. The recognition didn't stop with her solo work either. In 2023, the Supremes received the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award, cementing the group as one of the most enduring acts in popular music. Of course, every legacy brings debate. Some critics pointed out that her solo catalog lacked the consistency of her Supremes era, or that her ambition sometimes strained relationships. But those criticisms only complete the picture. Ross wasn't perfect, but she was intensely human. Meanwhile, the admiration endures. Fashion designers continue to draw inspiration from her iconic style. Artists like Beyoncé and Rihanna replicate that blend of showmanship and music that she mastered. New generations discover her voice, proving that her presence remains timeless. In the end, awards are just milestones, not the sum of her story. Diana Ross's true legacy lies in the doors she opened and the possibilities she embodied. More than a star, she became a symbol of how far determination and vision can take you. Beyond music, Ross redefined what it meant to be a diva. Her wardrobe of feathered boas, long sequined gowns, and dramatic fur coats wasn't just fashion, it was pure theater. Designers like Bob Mackie and Terry Mugler cited her as a muse, and younger stars like Madonna, Lady Gaga, and Beyoncé generously borrowed her stage presence, echoing her fearless embrace of spectacle. Stepping into the spotlight in sequins was, in a way, fear. Stepping into the spotlight in sequins was, in a way, channeling Ross's legacy, whether they knew it or not. Her impact was also profoundly social. In the late 60s and 70s, as America grappled with racial tensions, her music often became a soundtrack of hope. Reach Out and Touch Somebody's Hand was sung at rallies and civil rights meetings, becoming a kind of collective prayer for unity. Decades later, activists still point to Ross as proof that Black art could transcend barriers of race, gender, and class. Her mere visibility was an act of cultural defiance. Yet Ross's story was never lived in solitude. Her career was intertwined with friendships, rivalries, and the complex sisterhood of divas that reigned for decades. The press, always eager for drama, pitted her against Aretha Franklin in a silent duel. Headlines compared the Sun Queen to the supreme diva, fueling rumors of cold stares and unspoken competition at award ceremonies. True or not, these accounts only heightened the public's fascination with women who, rather than rivals, were carving out an impossible space in a male-dominated industry. Another supposed tension revolved around Ross and Dionne Warwick, stoked by shared television programs and audiences. Some close to her spoke of a polite distance rather than hostility, but the tabloids dubbed it the diva rivalry, much to the delight of their readers. Not all connections were strained. With Michael Jackson, she shared a rare bond that spanned decades, from Motown rehearsal rooms to late-night phone calls in adulthood. And after Whitney Houston's death, Ross became a source of comfort to her family, quietly visiting C.C. Houston to offer support. These were glimpses of loyalty that revealed another side of Diana Ross. Beyond competition, a friend who understood the weight of fame and the loneliness it could bring. Section 5. The Modern Chapter. A Second Wind. Some would say that Diana Ross's brightest days were behind her, and yet, starting in 2020, she entered a new chapter, more serene, wiser, but still full of moments capable of surprising the world. In the midst of the 2020 pandemic, she released Supertonic Mixes, a collection of remixes of her greatest hits. A year later came Thank You, 2021, her first album of original material in decades, recorded at home during lockdown. The album was intimate, not grandiose. Although reviews were mixed, it reached the top 10 in the UK, her first time in over 20 years. Then came her triumphant return to the stage. In 2022, she sang at Queen Elizabeth II's Platinum Jubilee in London and headlined the legendary Glastonbury Festival, where thousands of voices sang along to her Motown classics. In the following years came the Music Legacy Tour, the Music League, and the Beautiful Love Tour in the United States. At the closing show at the Hollywood Bowl, she ended the night surrounded by musicians, dancers, and her own family on stage. It was a moment that spoke less of spectacle and more of shared history and belonging. That same year, she surprised everyone at the 2025 Met Gala. She appeared in a white dress embroidered with the names of her children and grandchildren, turning fashion into autobiography. The message was clear. Her greatest legacy lay not only in music, but also in family. Her performances in this phase are not flawless. Sometimes her voice cracks, supported by backup singers or softened by age. But when the first chords of Chain Reaction or I Will Survive ring out, the audience rises to its feet in unison. The critics acknowledge it. Perhaps it's not perfect, but it is unmistakably Diana Ross, resilient, human, radiant. In this modern chapter, Ross no longer chases charts or awards. She focuses on connection, family, gratitude, and the enduring joy of singing. At over 80 years old, she has proven that passion doesn't fade with time. On the contrary, it deepens. Her greatest anchor throughout these years has been her family. Her daughter, Tracee Ellis Ross, rose to fame as an actress on the series Blackish, always acknowledging that her mother's strength inspired her. Tracee and her siblings often accompany Diana on the red carpet, and these public appearances radiate glamour, but also intimacy. Fans love seeing the diva not only as an icon, but as a mother surrounded by the children she fought to protect and raise. One particularly moving moment occurred during her 2023 tour when her son Evan surprised her on stage in Los Angeles. As Diana sang Ain't No Mountain High Enough, Evan appeared with his grandchildren. The audience erupted in applause, many with tears in their eyes, seeing 3 generations of the Ross family under the same spotlight. It was no longer just a concert, it was living history. Even now, when her voice sometimes falters, the audience rises from their seats. At Glastonbury, some noticed her high notes waver, but no one seemed to care. What mattered was her presence, the unmistakable aura of a woman who had carried decades of music on her shoulders. Dressed in sequins, chin held high, eyes sparkling, she transformed imperfection into a new kind of perfection. A reminder that even divas age, but their spirit remains indomitable. Section 6. Whispers and Reflections. Even legends walk with shadows. In Diana Ross's story, whispers have followed her for decades. Rumors, divided opinions, half-truths swirling around the spotlight. The myth that never faded. For years, the public believed Ross had discovered the Jackson 5. Motown fueled that idea with the Jackson 5's album Diana Ross Presents. In reality, it was producer Bobby Taylor who brought the brothers to the label. Ross never debunked the myth, and so it survived. A reminder of how celebrity narratives can outlive facts. Loyalty and controversy. Her close relationship with Michael Jackson kept her name linked to him long after the Supremes. In 2019, when Living Neverland sparked global debate, Ross publicly defended him as a magnificent and incredible force. His fans praised her loyalty. His critics accused her of minimizing the voices of survivors. The moment revealed how past alliances can tarnish a reputation even decades later. Private whispers. Speculation also reached her private life, like Smokey Robinson's claim of a teenage romance. Ross never confirmed it, and perhaps her silence spoke louder than words. Not every corner of a public life needs explaining. Icons and the passage of time. Her appearance at the 2025 Met Gala also marks it sparked debate, not just about fashion, but about how the public responds to aging icons. Admirers saw her dress as a touching tribute. Others interpreted it as a sign of vulnerability. The discussion was less about Ross herself than about society's discomfort at seeing its legends age. In the end, these stories, true, false, or somewhere in between, paint a portrait not of perfection, but of complexity. Diana Ross has always been more than a superficial glitter, and the whispers that follow her only underscore how deeply she remains in the public imagination. The rumors weren't just about music or romance. In the 1980s, with the pressures of fame mounting, Diana Ross quietly entered a brief rehabilitation program for alcohol dependency. To those around her, it was never a scandal, but an act of survival. an attempt by a woman burdened by decades of expectations to regain her footing. Few fans knew this at the time, and Ross herself rarely mentioned it. But that episode revealed the true cost that relentless fame can exact. Meanwhile, the press often portrayed her as impossible to deal with, a diva who demanded perfection, from the lighting to the tidiness of her dressing room. However, those in her inner circle told a different story. For them, Ross wasn't temperamental, but fiercely protective of her art and her team. If she asked for the best, a member of the tour recalled, it wasn't for herself, it was so that the audience would receive the show they deserved. That tension between perception and reality always stayed with her. On magazine covers, she was the untouchable star with a diamond crown. Offstage, she was a woman who longed to be understood, vulnerable to criticism, yearning for privacy. In many ways, the divide between Diana Ross, the icon, and Diana the human became the great dilemma of her life. Not all the rumors were related to her art. In 2002, Ross was arrested in Arizona for driving under the influence, an incident that grabbed headlines. For a woman whose image had always been polished, that mugshot was a shock to the public. Critics were quick to call her a fallen diva, though her fans countered that it merely revealed her humanity, a reminder that even icons stumble. Behind the scenes, stories also emerged. Some staff members complained about her demands, her habit of arriving late, or her requests for elaborate dressing room arrangements. For some, she was difficult. For others, simply a woman who made no apology for having high standards in an industry that often punished women for far less. The matter became rife with speculation. For years, rumors circulated about Rhonda's true parentage. When it was revealed that Berry Gordy was her biological father, some claimed that Rhonda felt like a stranger in her own home. Ross almost never spoke publicly about the issue, but those who knew her said she fought tooth and nail to keep her children together, convinced that love, not scandal, should define them. Section 7. Final thoughts. Diana Ross is more than a voice, more than a catalog of hits. She is a lesson in resilience, ambition, and how to rewrite one's own destiny. Her journey from a Detroit housing project to the pinnacle of global culture reminds us that greatness isn't inherited, it's built, often at a cost only the dreamer understands. Her legacy isn't measured in records and awards, but in the courage she embodied. She proved that a woman could command the stage with elegance and authority, that a black artist could redefine the boundaries of entertainment in America, that reinvention is always possible, even when the world insists otherwise. For those who came after, Ross left more than melodies. She left a map, to dare, to resist, and to keep moving forward when it would have been easy to step aside. In that sense, her story continues to inspire, not only as music to be listened to, but as proof that identity can be power and art, a way to survive. In the end, perhaps Diana Ross's greatest gift is reminding us that possibility itself is a song she has sung all her life, and that will continue to resonate long after the stage lights go out. Tall, draped in dazzling gowns. And then Diana Ross at 80, with a more serene smile, but with an equally powerful presence. It's not a curve of loss, but of resilience, beauty transformed into grace, fame into legacy. At one of her most recent concerts, she closed with "Ain't No Mountain High Enough." The audience sang louder than she did. In the front row, a woman wept openly, whispering, "She is my whole life." That night, the lights reflected not only Ross, but every person who had carried her songs in their heart. Ultimately, Diana Ross's story is both monumental and intimate. She was the young black girl from Detroit who conquered the world, and the mother who found happiness in seeing her children succeed. She was the glamorous diva who demanded perfection, and the fragile woman who sometimes stumbled. And perhaps therein lies her true legacy. Greatness isn't about never falling, but about getting up again and again until the song becomes eternal. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life and legacy of Diana Ross. See you in the next video.